I want to share with you something I've learned when I was reading a couple books this past week. And it's going to sound totally contradictory to what I've been telling you about using memory techniques to help you learn and remember information. So one of the books I finished reading this week was Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Amazing book. But when I was reading this book, I didn't use any memory techniques at all to remember what I read. That thought didn't even come to me when reading the book. It was only after I finished I was like, wait, I didn't even use any memory techniques to remember any ideas or concepts from this book. Well, the reason, after I thought about it for a while, the reason that was because I was reading the book. My goal was just to read the book, not to use techniques to remember specific points here and there. So on the screen you can see all these different types of books. And what you have to do is don't use memory techniques when you're reading a book. Because the point of reading a book is just to read it. Because you have a natural flow when you're reading a book, especially if you're reading a fiction book, some sort of story. Man, you just get lost in the story. You're like, oh, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? But once you start using memory techniques to try to remember what you're reading, you have to stop a lot. Stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. So it becomes more of a chore, and any flow you had to that book when you're reading it is gone. Because you're like, okay, wait, I want to remember this point. Okay, I'm going to use this memory technique. The location is this. Got it. Okay, moving on. What's the next point? Oh, this is something I should remember. Okay, memory technique, location, boom. It's so choppy, it absolutely ruins it. Now for me, I know if I read this book and I tried to use memory techniques at the same time I was reading it, I would have hated reading this book because I'm stopping all the time. And this book, goes into a lot of science about astrophysics and stuff like that, stuff I love. And so, it just made it more of a chore, and I want to have fun learning the information compared to me just going through it and reading it like I did. So right now, I didn't use any memory techniques to remember what was in the book. It was just my interest and how much I got lost in it that allowed me to remember the things I remember. So there was something in the book talking about dark matter that explains, this extra gravity we have out there in space. And then there's something called dark energy, and that's why that's something that's expanding the universe, and that was first kind of proposed by Albert Einstein when he talked about the cosmological constant, and then he said, oh no, that's my greatest blunder, so let's take that out. But then we realized Einstein was right, so we had to put the constant back in. And so that was just reading the book, just reading it, no memory techniques, right? And so that's what you have to realize. There's two different states when you're actually going through a book. You're reading the book, but then you're studying the book. And so when you're studying, that's when you want to use memory techniques. So say if I go to the chapter of dark matter, I'm like, okay, now I want to remember specific points. I'm going to be using memory techniques. Like, okay, here's this one point. Got it. Boom. Okay, what's the next point? Okay, memory techniques. Boom. Got it. I'm not worried about reading and ruining the flow because I'm just going back specifically with the goal of remembering specific points that I found interesting, that I want to remember. So that's what you have to realize, that you shouldn't be using memory techniques when you're reading a book. Use memory techniques when you're studying the book, when you're studying the chapter, because that's going to make it a lot easier for you to focus on the points. And then when you're reading, you can just focus on reading the material, trying to understand it as you're reading, and finishing the chapter or the book. Now, don't get me wrong, the goal when it comes to using memory techniques is to use them at a subconscious level. So when you're reading, man, just subconsciously, you're putting all this information that you want to remember in locations, or however you want to store the information. You're doing that on a subconscious level with memory techniques. That's the goal. That's the holy grail. But for me, I can't do that. I can't just naturally oh, I want to remember this, but not ruin the flow, because I actually have to stop. Like, okay, do I want to remember this? Is this something I want to use the memory technique to remember? Got it. That's what I have to do. And so for me, I just go read the book and then study the book after where I use memory techniques. Can we get to that point? Can everyone learn, practicing memory techniques long enough to read a book and automatically start remembering every single thing in the book while using memory techniques? Maybe, but how long is it going to take? How much practice? How many books you have to read before that becomes natural? I don't know. But hopefully I can get there at one point. But right now, the idea behind this video is don't use memory techniques while reading. Use memory techniques while you're studying. That's going to make a complete difference to how you actually learn and remember information. It's like different levels to learning, okay? So hopefully this video makes sense, and hopefully you got something out of it. And actually try what I'm saying. Find a book that's kind of small like this one, and just read it without any memory techniques. Find a book that you actually like, but read the book and just see how much you actually remember just by reading it, just by how much you actually like the subject. Then go back with memory techniques and try to find things that you want to remember specifically, the study portion of it, and see the difference between them both. Because I want to go back and try to remember specific points to this book, and that's going to be, after I'm done reading it, because I already read the book, so it's going to be a little bit different on how I approach it, how I look at the information. So hopefully you enjoy this video, and I'll see you next time.